Tony.
Oh, go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another session from the Paris Peace Forum. Increasingly, cybersecurity is a part of keeping peace, ever more so now in the age of AI. And this session is actually called Building a Resilient Digital Future. At the heart of this conversation we're about to have is really security, safety, and defense. We're going to talk about it from two distinct but related angles, the threats that we see and the ones that we don't see. We have two powerhouse leaders here who I'm about to introduce. First, I'll tell you, as many of us remember, it's hard to forget, in 2019, there was a terrorist attack on two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, left 51 people dead, 50 more injured, and it was live streamed for 17 minutes before it was taken down off a social media site. And Dame Jacinda Ardern, who then was Prime Minister of New Zealand, led an international movement called the Christchurch Call, pulling together governments as well as the tech sector, big tech companies, to eliminate terror and violent extremism online. Welcome, Dame Jacinda. Give her a round of applause. So much to talk about. And also with me, Lisa Monaco, who is now President of Global Affairs at Microsoft, spent years working in the government. She was a Homeland Security advisor as well as Deputy U.S. Attorney General, where she confronted firsthand many of these threats that we're going to talk about. So to dive right in, Dame Jacinda, I want to start on you. Looking back on the Christchurch Call and what you were able to accomplish so quickly in 2019, pulling together all of these multi-stakeholders into not just collaboration, but really international cooperation. When we think about the geopolitical landscape right now, that seems really hard to do. How did you do it?
A great question to start with, because let's start in a positive frame where we have seen cooperation and progress. Well, firstly, a warm kia ora to all of you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having us today. You know, for us, and this my involvement in this work was born out of crisis, and undeniably one of the reasons that we were able to bring together a tripartite grouping in the way that we were, which included technology companies, included government, and included civil society, was because there was a moment in time where the world stood in horror. Not only 51 members of our Muslim community's lives taken, but live streamed. And live streamed because ultimately, we know this through research and evidence, that those who seek to engage in violent extremism and terrorism often have three commonalities. They seek revenge, or some kind of vengeance in their act. They seek infamy, and they seek a response. And there is no question that the online environment is an enabler for them to achieve at least two of those three things. And so being a really pragmatic country as New Zealand is, being surrounded by pragmatic policymakers, our view was we must do what we can to prevent this happening again. And governments alone, we have a large number of very blunt instruments in government, and regulation alone was never going to resolve the issues we saw, including the pathways to radicalization. And so that's why the Christchurch Call was born and includes civil society, tech, and government. The second reason that we were able to build that grouping as we were in that time was because there was consensus, and there is still today. And that consensus is we do not want to have an online world where we experience violent extremism and terrorism. And we're also unified in our ambition towards an open, free, and secure internet. So crisis and consensus. We cannot let crisis be the catalyst for future cooperation. And so my call to action in the AI space, and this is a space the call now works in as well, trying to build those guardrails early, is let's not wait for crisis to bring those three groups together on these issues.
I was going to say, so 2019, when the terrorist attack happened, social media had long left the barn, so to speak. I mean, Twitter was 2006, YouTube before that, Facebook slightly before that. We're in a different place with AI. Obviously, it's still in some sort of infancy. It's growing very quickly, though. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, the work of Christchurch Call continues. How is AI impacting what you're doing?
I mean, it'll be obvious to all those who are in the room where this is an area of interest that AI has either the possibility of, for instance, improving content moderation and providing interventions and disruption, or it has the ability to also further harms, increase radicalization, and exacerbate issues of terrorism and extremism online. The Christchurch Call initiative is not a static initiative. It is a foundation that still has 130 organisations engaged with it. We're one of the pillars for us of work now is emerging technology. So let me just give you a couple of practical examples of some of the work that we're doing, one of which is a little extra arm that's been announced by a partner today. We've always been concerned with making sure that tools are available for trust and safety, and particularly in the AI space, that aren't just for major platforms. We need smaller operators to have access to these tools. So we've really encouraged the development of open source tools. We've created an initiative called Elevate, where we've partnered with Roost, who have today announced that alongside OpenAI, will be OpenAI releasing some of their trust and safety tools that include those that relate to self-harm and the use of AI around that particular issue. So here we're building a network together that's trying to create open source tools that can be used by smaller platforms. We also have an initiative called the Christchurch Call Initiative on Algorithmic Outcomes. Not a snappy title, but a desperately needed initiative, because if we're to intervene on those radicalization pathways, we have to understand the algorithmic journey that users are on. And this is also relevant in the AI space. So we've built a tool that will enable accredited researchers to be able to follow those algorithmic journeys, to try and build the disruption, the off-ramps for people who are on the pathways to radicalization. And we're in phase 2 of the development of that tool at the moment, and it's something that over the last 5 years, we've seen how desperately needed it is. And our final little project I wouldn't mind promoting here is Catalyst. We know there is an intersection between gender-based violence and radicalization, as up to 40% or more of mass shootings in the United States are motivated by gender-based violence. We have not looked at that nexus enough, and so we have a consortium that involves ISD, Imperial, and others working across 3 sites, Jordan, Canada, and Kenya, to start looking at programs, training, tools, inoculations in the area of misogyny online, because we know it is a part of the pathway towards violent extremism and radicalization. So yes, we started 5 years ago. We are more relevant now than ever, and we're constantly looking for partners to continue this incredibly important work.
Thank you so much, Dame Jacinda. Turning now to Lisa, from the threats online that unfortunately we see too often to the many unseen cyber crimes that are happening. Microsoft recently released its 2025 Digital Defense Report. I want you to give people a sense of the threat landscape as you're seeing it.
Thanks so much, Tony. And it's wonderful to share a stage with Jacinda. Microsoft was, of course, incredibly proud and privileged to partner with and be part of the Christchurch Call several years ago under Jacinda's leadership and that of President Macron. So really all kudos to Jacinda on her continued leadership here. So you're quite right. I mean, the contrast is quite striking. The vivid live streaming of the horror that we saw in Christchurch contrasted with the invisible, oftentimes invisible threats we are facing, both government and the private sector and citizenry facing from cyber threats. But there is something in common, right? The tools that we need to apply to these threats. And so I'll give you just a little outline of the Digital Defense Report that we released just a week ago. This is our annual report drawing from literally trillions of daily signals that Microsoft is able to see of malicious activity online. Literally trillions of security signals that we're seeing, 4.5 million daily blocking of malware, malicious software online, and we're able to draw several insights. And I will tell you, I think the headline here is that we are at a turning point. We are seeing the adversary acting in more advanced, more sophisticated ways, and at a speed and scale often fueled by AI, in a way that I haven't seen before. And as you noted in your introduction, I've been in this space for some time. You know, what we're seeing is half of those incidents are ransomware or extortion efforts. And it may be unseen in many instances. For every cyber attack you see lifted in the headlines, there are thousands and thousands of unseen attempts and efforts here. And some of them have very real impact, right? We see malicious actors going after the most vulnerable populations, attacking hospitals, holding hospitals for ransom, quite literally ceasing services, often causing life and death issues. So what we're seeing is what used to be a technological challenge, a business risk that people would look at and maybe monitor. It now is a societal challenge. And there, I think we have something quite in common, which is to say, once we are at this societal challenge level, we've got to pool our resources, pool our perspectives, pool our expertise, as was done in the Christchurch Call. And that is what we have to be bringing to the case here with regard to the cyber threat. One last point on what we're seeing with the role of AI. It is both, as Brad Smith has said, a tool, the quintessential tool and weapon. It is greatly advantaging the adversary, I would argue, from allowing for really a tremendous speed and sophistication in social engineering, making those phishing attacks much more precise. It is also allowing adversaries to hunt for vulnerabilities to exploit at machine speed. But the good news is it is also helping the defender, right, to respond, to detect vulnerabilities more quickly, to detect attacks more quickly, and to respond in an automated way. But where these threats join is, of course, the adversary's use of AI to produce synthetic content, both to fuel attacks and also, of course, to undermine democracies. So all of which I think combines to tell us that we need to have a coordinated response. That means the international community, that means the private sector, that means civil society and governments coming together to create a collective resilience, to coin a phrase from the title here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do want to pick up on the threat to democracy point in a second if there's time. But first, something you both probably can respond to from your positions both in government and private sector, accountability. If a person were to storm through your neighborhood, any of our neighborhoods, and start busting windows and stealing things out of everyone's home, they're going to hopefully get caught, but certainly the police are going to be after them very quickly. And we might know, because there are so many surveillance cameras, who that person was, right? Now, online cybercrime has cost the global GDP something like $10 trillion. And that's a lot of money, yet so many of these crimes go unpunished. Why?
So I think there's a number of reasons. It is not a completely dire situation, I would say. Putting on my former hat from a law enforcement and national security perspective, the collective kind of law enforcement and public safety apparatus has gotten a lot better at what's called attribution, figuring out, to coin a phrase, who done it. Right? To this invisible threat, it is often difficult to determine in the first instance, but we've gotten a lot better at that. But again, only from working together, sharing intelligence from the private sector, sharing with the government, and vice versa, having trusted channels for that to happen, pooling our understanding of the threat as we have done. That's why we issue this digital defense report, to share our insights to help customers, to help governments understand and better defend themselves. So understanding who has done it is a critical element. But the other issue here is, how do you get effective deterrence? And I think one thing we have seen is we've pooled efforts to disrupt malicious cyber actors, those using AI and not. That has only had significant impact, I would argue, when we all work together. In my former roles, I did not see an impactful disruption operation of malicious nation state or criminal activity that didn't involve an international response, coordinated with law enforcement, coordinated with the private sector. It had to be done hand in glove if there was going to be an impact. And that is something I think we need to replicate. As this adversary gets more sophisticated, we in turn have to get more sophisticated and pool our collaboration to address that threat.
So, Dame Jacinda, to pick up just briefly on the point of protecting democracy, 2024 brought
just that small point of
just
protecting democracy.
Yeah, that we can talk about in the next 90 seconds or so. You know, 2024 was an unprecedented year of elections, and something like 70 nations held federal level or nationwide level elections. And there were enormous concerns about the impact that AI could have. It was the first year of elections that big where generative AI was very much at play. Tech companies, 20 major tech companies, Microsoft being one of them, but really all of them came together with the Tech Accord to identify and call out fake images. The end, it ended up being, thankfully, a little bit of the dog that didn't bark, but AI is getting more sophisticated. From your perspective, moving forward, there are going to be more elections, in just a year or so, and they're still ongoing. What more needs to be done to protect democracy from the spread of deepfakes and disinformation?
So your reference, your frame here in this case was what was the impact of AI in elections, when actually I think we need to think more broadly about the disruption that we see, or the influence that we see, particularly experienced in more recent times by Western liberal democracies. And there for me it's a case of the dog was already barking. We know that disinformation has caused significant disruption. We know it has. You ask any world leader. I remember Angela Merkel speaking about this at an APEC forum not long before she left, in the context at that time of me asking her the question, how did you do so long in office? I think at that point I was in maybe year 4 and she was year 15 maybe. And she said to me, it's completely different. There used to be a time where you would debate and, there would be an issue that you were debating within your country. It would be on the news. People would argue about the different perspectives on it. They would debate it in the workplace. And eventually you would build some consensus and some resolution. We can't even agree what the facts are anymore. And I think we've taken for granted how critical that is to a stable our foundations that underpin Western liberal democracy. And so, yes, AI poses further threat to that, not necessarily new, but is exacerbating something that's already there. The issue I think we have is that governments themselves, I think, find discomfort in dealing with the disinformation question, lest it be seen that they are somehow interfering in issues of free speech, when this is actually an entirely different debate altogether. And so I think we see safety in numbers. The fact that the EU, I think, has worked diligently or is looking at these issues diligently. We equally, in the Christchurch Call Foundation, have an interest in disinformation as it leads to, within the frame of how does this issue lead to radicalization and then subsequently violent extremism and terrorism. That is safe space. If we still have that consensus point that no one wishes to see someone radicalized to the point of violent extremism, that is an entry point for a difficult discussion about what is the role of disinformation in that. And increasingly, we see, look at Southport. After that attack, we saw disinformation spread, which led to violent acts against migrant communities. This is increasingly relevant, not just to public safety, but also to our democracies.
Go ahead.
You know, I'd say to this point of seeing the geopolitical use of these tools, we see it too, and this is called out in our report, of the cyber attacks, oftentimes AI-fueled, is being used as a tool of geopolitical leverage, right? In the report that we've released, we indicate that the most frequent, the countries that are the subject of the most frequent cyber attacks, the top 10 countries, all NATO countries, plus Ukraine. Probably not an accident, right? Now, interesting for this audience to know, across Europe, France is number 4 in that list of most frequently attacked, and number 12 globally. So this gives you some frame of reference of how cyber attacks and AI as part of that can be used as a geopolitical tool as well.
Yeah, and I also think to echo what Dame Jacinda said about all the threats that we're talking about today, and it's a good reminder, AI kind of puts them on steroids, but none of them are new. Yeah. You know, I mean, cybercrime and disinformation, these things have existed, you know, as long as there's been
It's like alcohol. It doesn't give you a new personality, but it definitely ramps up the one that you had.
It brings out, yeah, whatever's lying underneath. Hopefully it's somebody fun. But anyway.
Let's not take that risk. Everyone's got that uncle, you know?
Yeah, right. But so the other point that I think I would love for us to address, because I think it's important, is that there is a growing concern that I think could become a security concern of how AI and the AI economy might exacerbate inequality if it is not properly diffused. Yeah. And Lisa, maybe I'll turn to you on that point.
So this is an incredibly important point and a priority for Microsoft. I mean, history shows us that technologies, general purpose technologies, those that diffuse or get adopted fastest and most broadly, those societies that adopt those technologies faster and wider are the ones who prosper. Whether it's the steam engine or electricity, you don't have to have invented the light bulb to benefit from it. You have to use it and adopt it. So what are we seeing with AI? AI is being adopted at a faster rate than any other previous general purpose technology. However, it's not being done evenly. Unsurprisingly, I suspect to this audience, what we see in terms of the rate of adoption, much, much higher in the global north than in the global south. And there are some real impediments to adoption. What we're seeing is lack of access to electricity and power, lack of connectivity, device connectivity, and very critically, lack of skills. And this is an area where Microsoft is investing across all of those blockers to adoption, but in particular on skilling and providing training and the necessary tools for people to benefit broadly and evenly from the AI economy. And so we announced an initiative earlier this summer called Microsoft Elevate to say...
Did you catch that?
Yeah,
there are 2 elevates.
There's a theory, though, but the point being, we need to invest and fuel that upskilling of individuals to help them benefit from this technology. So we're putting behind this $4 billion of investment with a goal of training and providing much-needed credentials to 20 million people over the next 2 years, because it's only through broadly adopting and giving and helping people acquire the tools that they need that will be able to make sure that we're diffusing this technology evenly and safely.
So, Dame Jacinda, on that point, there are something like 1 billion people on the planet who have interacted with AI tools. Some use them more often than others. But that also means there are 7 billion who haven't. And for all the reasons that Lisa just listed, either lack of connectivity or lack of stable Wi-Fi or, you know, various economic reasons. But how do we bring them responsibly and inclusively into the AI economy? That includes cultural understanding, language understanding. What can we learn from mistakes, perhaps, if I may say so, that were made on social media that can be applicable right now?
Two thoughts on that. Firstly, the public are already telling us in their sentiment towards AI how they feel based on past experience. And the fact that you get something like when Pew surveyed, I think it was American adults, they got something like 17% who were feeling positive or even relatively neutral. The majority are sceptical or worried. And yet that does not mirror what those who are working in the AI space feel. And I think probably what we're seeing is a bit of a hangover from the last time the public was sold all of the pros without there being enough consideration of the cons. And that is not to say that the argument is a zero-sum game. It is not a future with AI or without it. It's a future with AI with guardrails and safety and a thoughtfulness that in the past we have not properly developed, implemented, or collaboratively worked upon. And so the lesson, therefore, is let's not repeat those same mistakes. I have to acknowledge those partners who are in the room. In particular, I want to just give a little acknowledgement, of course, to Microsoft, who were there with us on the Christchurch Call from the beginning, and governments like the French government, who were core founding partners with us, and the Canadian government, who continue to be so strong, and of course civil society. If you have those three groups at the table, tech, government and civil society, then you are venturing forward all of the arguments that need to be given due consideration and all of the accountabilities. Public good, commercial imperative, human rights, civil rights, all at that table. In my view, it is the only way to proceed.
We are at time, but I'm going to give you one last word because I think that Dame Jacinda has raised a very important issue, which is trust, right? And from your perspective at Microsoft, how important is trust as we roll out these new products?
I would draw these themes together that you've heard from both Jacinda and I. We can't look at this as AI and cybersecurity as two separate silos. We have to be talking about them together. We should be innovating and securing that innovation at the same time. We can be moving these things in tandem. When something can be both a tool and a weapon, you can only make sure that it is trusted if you do bring exactly these voices together to make progress and to take action where needed. Multi-stakeholder fora like this one are exactly the place to do exactly that, as we've seen with the Christchurch Call and as we've seen with this discussion. So thank you very much, Tony.
Lisa Monaco, Dame Jacinda Ardern, thank you. Thank you all in the room, and thank you all for watching.